Somebody told me behavior is the ultimate reality. Correct. So I think it's very important to understand not just what people are saying, what people are doing. Right? Is there a say-do gap, and why is that say-do gap happening? And you also must understand that you are thinking about your category 50 hours a week, right? But your consumer is probably not even thinking about your category 50 seconds a week. Data and analytics have contributed it. They have told you what is going on, right? And that will only become bigger, faster, cheaper, right? And will be gathered with more accuracy. There will be a predictive component to it, which is built in, right? I would classify all that as the what revolution. What we are missing out right now and what we need, I think, what is starting is the why revolution. Correct. I mean, and just to quote Gandhiji, which is my favorite quote of Gandhiji's, that speed is irrelevant if you're traveling in the wrong direction.
Yeah. What is one missed opportunity that you wish you could have a second chance at?
So at one point of time, I was planning on opening an analytics company. And at that time, the analytics revolution was happening, right? So if I had not chickened out and followed on my dream, who knows?
Hello, fellows. Welcome to the next episode of Jagged with Just Ravi. For conversations at the edge with thought leaders from the branding, marketing, and the business world, subscribe to my channel. Conversations that ignite new ideas with rough and sharp edges. Hi, Shourav. So nice to have you on my show. Shall I say finally?
Hi, Jashavi. Finally, yes.
In our format, we request our guests to tweet their profile. What would you say?
Well, I started my journey career many years back in what is now called Kantar. Started off in India, then was in Dubai for some time. Came back to India, was with ITC for some time. Then 16 years back, I joined Colgate. In Colgate, I have spent about, almost 60-40, 60 in innovation roles, 40 in insights and analytics roles. And right now, I'm part of a group in Colgate which looks at driving oral care growth at scale globally, and I head strategic insights and analytics for that group. So that's me.
So what is...
And just one more thing, just Ravi, I think also because that's been a very key learning experience to me. This thing of having lived and worked in so many cities, right? Because that's a tremendous learning experience.
Yeah. Okay. So if I had to say that in 2-3 ways, how are these countries different in how they look at oral care?
How people look at oral care is going to be a function of how people look at health, how they kind of look at how they turn out, how they health, grooming in general, right? So there is and that will be dictated, and the countries can be very different, right? So one is the arc of development which plays a role, correct? So when you come to Europe, when you come to the US, there is a greater propensity to go to the dentist, right? When you come to India or come to the other markets, the chances of going to the dentist are lower, right? So, and that will dictate certain differences in the way we look at oral care, right? It's also, and also I think, it's the way marketers have played segments, right? Which will determine kind of, the attitude towards various aspects of oral care, including white teeth, fresh breath, and a lot of things. It will differ across markets simply because in their arc of development, in culturally, these markets can be very, very different, right? So you have you have outliers like you have countries like China, which would be very different, right? Because it has gone through a very different arc of development, is a very distinctive culture, right? So you would have things which are very different in China as compared to, let's say, the rest of the world, right? And again, I mean, it's also a function of how China has developed. So I don't think it would be surprise to anybody. I mean, everybody knows about it. The kind of level of development, the level of the level of social commerce or digital commerce that China has, the the manufacturing ecosystem that China has, which allows very, very small brands in China to get scale and do pretty well, right? So that way, China is different. So these countries are different culturally, they are different in their arc of development, and that's what dictates how they are different in terms of how they look at health, how they look at grooming, and therefore the impact that it will obviously have on oral care.
Yeah. So yes, health, grooming, self concept, and how they turn out, and
Correct,
how they look
correct.
at, yeah. So all these things you mentioned.
Mm.
So but innovation, when you were talking about innovation, and your focus is being on, because of the way the categories habit formation in that space, how is it, if you want to take some examples, how your brief for research uh, takes a different focus, if at all? Because I'll tell you, I'll share something here, Shourav. I don't know if we talked about it earlier. When there was this a new technique that we had, brought when we were working with Unilever in market research for Unilever, and it was all about understanding in categories like oral care and hair, all FMCG categories, but a lot about grooming. Uh, what are the enablers, motivators that make change happen? Upward positive change, in the sense either it's upgradation of category format, multiple formats, such as people spending a more premium brand. What are the kind of aspects that uh, lead to that kind of change? And what we found is that uh, there were always some bigger things happening in life, like promotion has happened, or from joint family to nuclear family has happened, or the woman of the house has started something doing part time, so she suddenly become more conscious, or so some change has happened, like you were talking earlier, and that's why it struck me that how I see myself, and in my social context, that is going to define how much I'm going to invest uh, in the brand, in the what I adopt. So please share your views about this, and if you could take an example, it will be really useful for the audiences.
That's a very interesting question, and it's something that keeps any innovator or insight person in this should keep any innovator or insight person in this space awake at night, right? So all CPG to a certain extent is about habit, right? I mean, most CPG are essentially low involvement categories, if you can call it that, right? They are considered low involvement categories. That's the kind of stereotype that you have. And a lot of behavior happens because of habit, correct? When you go and brush in the morning, you do it because you are used to doing it. If you don't do it, you feel something is missing, correct? And that's the power of habit that you have. What happens in any habit driven categories is getting new occasions, new formats becomes a challenge, right? Because you have to inculcate a new habit, right? We hear a lot of talk these days about people being people centric, people centricity, right? Just talking to people is not people centricity, right? When I started off my journey in this profession, one of my earliest mentors used to tell me, the problem with research is that is not the fact that people don't answer questions. The problem is that the fact is that people answer questions. So whatever you ask them, people will answer. Who does wants to look kind of silly, right? You ask me a question, I would like to kind of look smart. I'll give you a smart answer, which would kind of button up all the dots, join up all the dots, and very logical, rational answer. But that's exactly what it is. It's logical and rational, right? I might show you something which is new. You might say, yeah, this is the thing that was missing in my life. But then it has to get beyond the gravity of habit change. Right? Now, how do you get that, right? I'll talk about the techniques. One is, I think I have this thing of, somebody told me behavior is the ultimate reality. Correct. So I think it's very important to understand not just what people are saying, what people are doing, right? Is there a say-do gap, and why is that say-do gap happening? People are saying that, I will brush twice a day, but are they brushing twice a day, right? Why is that say-do gap opening up, right? So that's one thing, right? Which is a very simple thing. I'll start off with the simple hacks, and then I'll go to sophisticated techniques. And today, with digital opening up, there's a lot of stuff that you have where you can monitor behavioral data. That's one. Second, and this may sound very counterintuitive, you always have to put yourself in person's shoes, right? Correct? And you also must understand that you are thinking about your category 50 hours a week, right? But your consumer is probably not even thinking about your category 50 seconds a week, right? And what changes does that bring in? Right? And related to that is this, that, and I at least believe that some of the best insights come when you have the ability to start querying yourself, or you look at your family and friends and see why are they behaving this way. I mean, as a good insights person, you have to be, if there's one trait that differentiates a great insights person from a not so great insights person, is this insane curiosity, right? I still, when I sit at a Starbucks, I actually, and that's bad, I actually keep my ear, open for conversations that are flowing around me, right? I love to hear what other people are saying. That it might that not sound nice, but that's what my insights kind of, gene has taught me. So one is to query yourself as to what made you change something. Would you have done it, right? If before joining Colgate, did you think about oral care that much? So, and that's a question I always keep on asking myself, and that's a good hack that I've got. That before I worked in the category, did I think about the category this much?
So one hack, Shourav, you've mentioned is what are they doing, and through behavior you can understand, and what are they saying, and where is the gap? So
And why is the gap happening?
why is the most important thing, like we were discussing earlier, that that part gets missed. Yeah, so we capture a lot of data and we're saying, okay, this is behavioral pattern, this is what, let's run with it. But when we don't get to the why, and we can go completely wrong. So so that's one gap that you have to understand. Second thing you're saying is reflect as a normal person. This is for the clients, because you love your product, but for the consumer, it's just one aspect that
Absolutely.
it does in a day. So, so you reflect as a consumer and introspect and stay curious.
Absolutely.
Right. So now, what's the next?
So just to build on the second point, it's not just about innovation and habit change, right? You can stuff a lot of things into your advertising, right? The only person who'll see it is you in the PowerPoint slides in your office, right? Because the consumer, for a consumer, I mean, so this entire thing of, putting yourself in the person's shoes, and especially calibrating the level of your involvement versus the level of your consumer's involvement, I think is very critical, right? That's one. And that's what people centricity is all about to me. The second, and I'll give you a personal example of a habit change, right? It's a personal example. It obviously has a bearing on marketing, right? And some of the points I'll highlight what you just said, right? One point is this, that you talked about, is there an infection in your life which leads to habit change? So let me give you the example of, you know, I love to shower. I can't sleep without showering, right? It's not that I am in an air conditioned environment most of the days, right? I hardly go out of office, or, and even, the weather is also not kind of, but I do it every day, and I can't sleep without showering at night, right? Now, if I were to query myself, why did this happen? Right? If I were trying to make people shower at night, if my business was in personal and body wash, and I wanted to people shower more at night, if I went to people and asked them, oh, why do you think showering at night is good? Yes, I want to clean up the hygiene, it's healthy. Now let's look at why I did it. It started off is when I started my work life, right? I mean, the agency had this very good system, and I think all agencies should have this. They send us to for 1 month in the field, go around and work as an ordinary interviewer, interview people. And I've gone to many parts of India, and and I started my career in India, many villages in India, slums in India, places which I would normally not have gone into, right? So, but obviously, this was summer in India, July. So obviously I came back home sweaty, and therefore that's when my showering habit started, right? What I realized, so it needed an inflection point to start. It needed a certain change in life to start, right? But what has made me stick to it, correct? Because this entire thing of I don't no longer now roam around slums and villages and places where with the sun beating down on, but I've kept this habit going. Because what has happened is that along the way, I realized that I was showering, even when I was not, even when I was in an air conditioned office throughout the day. I realized that, it gave me a certain degree of pleasure. Correct. It felt nice, right? It felt nice. And now what has happened, Jasravi, is this that it's become a habit. It's become such that I cannot sleep without showering. So that's the arc of habit change. It needs so just to highlight, it needs an inflection point, right? It needs some change. In many cases, so you can say that does it happen serendipitously? There are ways in which you can make it happen, right? Then you need to find what is the trigger that would make you stick to that habit, correct? And that trigger in my case was even when the initial condition was not there. The trigger was that I found it enjoyable. Correct, and that's the trigger to highlight to people, probably, right? And then it became a habit. Then you did need not do anything. Now it would be very difficult for me to not shower at night, right? So does that make it clear? Habit change?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, when we are looking at the gratification, there would be certain things, just going by the example that you're talking, that wherein the initial understanding of the person, devoid of the category, if it's done deeper. For example, like what came to my mind is that perhaps because, your work requires you to involve your mind a lot, think, read, all your senses, and maybe you experience that if you have a shower in the night, it helps you switch off and calm down, and hence have better sleep. So
Absolutely.
so if I'm present to your this thing, and I can use this as a probe, and see what you feel, and know that are you just nodding, or is it really so, because in terms of how, so that is the whole qualitative aspect of introspecting, being intuitive, being present to body language, and then getting aspects that are unsaid.
So I think, can I just, and again, let's now come to how you query people, right? I think that's a very good point you made. I mean, it's almost, you said that it's almost like a partition. The shower is a partition between my work day and my sleep. Right? That's a fabulous insight, right? Now, if just imagine if I were to ask you, and if you were in the same situation, if I were to ask you, Jastravi, why would you do shower at night? You would never tell me that, right? Yeah, the tiredness washes away, the it's that ability to probe deeper. Why is that person doing it, right? What does that person mean? If I were in that person's shoes, does it make sense? This person is saying, I want to clean myself, right? This person sits in an air conditioned office every day, right? Unless he is a germaphobe or something, it would be difficult, and there are not no, there are not enough germaphobes in the world to have a sustainable business, probably. But that's the thing I was trying to say, that this ability to go deeper and beyond what people say is very, very critical in terms of habit change, in terms of any innovation for that matter, according to me.
Yeah. Is there any other hack here? Is there any other framework that is
So
important?
the framework I find very useful is, and now coming to formal frameworks, and I am a great believer in templates and frameworks, because they allow you to free up your mind to think in terms of a structured manner at times, right? So I would say that, I think behavioral science, and I know there's a lot of work that is happening on behavioral science, right? And there are many schools of behavioral science, right? But fundamentally, I think, it's a, it's a, it's something that, it has frameworks, which I think are important to incorporate, right? So things like, what are my intrinsic beliefs? Right? So I approach a situation or a choice with a certain I have a goal. So I approach an intrinsic, when I am given a goal, I have an intrinsic belief in me. Correct? And that's also where a lot of stereotyping occurs, right? So for example, if I want to let's say I'm inviting you for dinner, just Ravi, to my house, and I want to impress you, I want to serve you premium alcohol, right? I hope you drink. So if I want to serve you premium alcohol, and then I go to the supermarket to buy stuff for tonight, and then there is a belief in me that beers are cheap. Correct. So that's an intrinsic. It's a very category belief in me. Correct. That beers are cheap. So if I serve beer to us, just Ravi, she's not going to be very impressed with me. Correct. So we start off with these beliefs, right? So my goal was to kind of, Jasravi is coming for dinner and I need to serve her something which gives her a good impression of me, right? But when I go to the market and if I'm selling beer, then the belief that clashes there is this, that but beer is cheap, right? And therefore, how do I make beer feel more expensive? There is this case study of Stella, the Belgian beer, which you serve it in wine glasses, you stack it in, and there are many other things. So I think it's important to look at, and that's the other thing. So even if you do not use the format of behavioral sciences, right, you need to be very clear and very. I mean, that's something important to find out. What are the intrinsic beliefs that I'm clashing? I'm clashing against when I'm trying to do something. If I'm selling beer, one belief that I am clashing against is that beer is cheap.
Yes,
Right?
yes,
So
yes.
either I abandon such occasions,
Mm,
correct,
mm.
or if I want to take advantage of such occasions, I need to do something that addresses that belief. So that belief system that I have is very critical because a lot of what we call system one is actually driven by our belief systems, right? And therefore, it's
Mm.
important to understand what is the core belief that I am kind of, impacting, because that will determine the choice you make.
So a decade back, how a CMI was going about things, and now how it's going about things, because this whole digitization that has happened, and so much data, big data, being pulled, every time there's a social media is giving, e-com is giving this a whole lot of behavioral data that one has. Now that could be just one of the things in terms of the change that has happened. But I'm saying uh, how CMI used to function then, how CMI functions now, what are the good and the bad points, and one of the aspects, of course, I'd like you to talk about is the confluence of data analytics and insights, because like we actually started with the fact that insight is not what it's made out.
So let me tell you what, at least in my mind, what the fundamental change has been and what, used to be called research and insights, right? Or let's see what research used to do 16, 17 years back, right? What research used to do is this, that in my mind, because you could not get data at the point of consumption, correct? You went to a supermarket, you bought stuff, you came out, yes, you had some POS data. If it was India, you went to a Kirana store, or if it was in the Philippines, you had gone to a sari. There was not even there. I mean, it was hardly as you know, in India, it's a cash payment system in the Kirana store. Now, of course, it's changed. India has changed dramatically. But 15, 16 years back, it was somebody going and paying cash and getting stuff from the retailer, right? So what was happening, and you saw, let's say you sat at home, you watched TV, you digested TV, you could not collect data at the point of consumption. When somebody saw an ad on TV, you would not get real time data on
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah.
How you're reacting to an ad is something I could not get real time, correct? But today, in a large swaths of digital media, I can get it real time, correct? So therefore, ditto with buying, right? Today with e-commerce buying, I can get exactly what you are considering, not considering, putting into the cart, throwing out of the cart. I have that data, right? And that does not require any additional curation from my part. So that's what has changed in insights, right? So I don't need to do that anymore, because increasingly, and it's not completely there, but increasingly things will kind of, I will get that data, right? Correct. So given that, what is the role of insights and what is the role of everything, right? So what the world has gone through is what I call the what revolution, correct? So there's a lot of data and there'll be more data coming in, right? So the what is happening is something that you'll get to know, correct? Right. We have increasingly sophisticated analytics frameworks and algorithms to process that data, model that data, and all that, right? Correct. What it will result in is that, yes, you will get some kind of correlation, right? What this happens because of this happens and this also happens, right? Correct. And yes, you will get scorecards. So you now what you have is a what revolution, as I say. Data and analytics have contributed, they have told you what is going on, right? And that will only become bigger, faster, cheaper, right? And will be gathered with more accuracy. There will be a predictive component to it which is built in, right? It will result in a lot of things like dashboards, scorecards. There'll be a democratization of that. The brand manager, the assistant brand manager will have screens where he or she can access that data and take, and there'll be a certain predictive component to it, right? I would classify all that as the what revolution. What we are missing out right now and what we need, I think, what is starting is the why revolution. Correct? Why is something happening? Correct? And that's very critical, right? So, for example, let me give you two examples, one real life and one hypothetical, right? So, when the pandemic started, right, the data said, right, that credit, because you can get easily access the amount of quantum of credit card payments, right? Credit card payments in some markets were going up, right? So everybody said, no, 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 no. I mean, it's not as if that the economy is slowing down because of COVID. We look at the amount of credit card spending, right? Because that is what the data was telling you, right? When you look deeper, right, you realize that in many markets, in many countries, people had actually switched from cash to credit cards because they were worried about contact. So even people who did not use credit cards were actually using credit cards, right? Correct. The amount of cash in the economy, how much is being spent, would take a long time to understand, right? Because that data, for that data to come in. So actually, if I just depended on data and analyze the data and said, hey, my credit card payments have actually not gone down, they've gone up, the economy is fine and dandy, then that's a wrong conclusion. But if you had gone and asked even 10 people what they were doing, right, you would have got a fairer understanding. And at least you might not have got, say, a data based, evidence based thing, but you would have had this thing that, look, it's not, let's wait. A lot of us do market mix models, right?
Sorry, what is that? Could you repeat?
A market mix model is a model where you kind of correlate advertising spends to sales by various media, right? And and you do it for various creatives. So you understand the sales impact of every creative. Yeah.
Right.
So that's what a market mix model does, and in many cases, it's a kind of a keep or yank decision. Oh, it's working. It's giving you great return on investment. Let's take it, keep it, and if it's not, but I think somewhere you need to again start wearing things. Correct. So let's say you are advertising a new format, right? Or somebody started advertising tooth strips, right? That's a new format.
Right.
A Tide pen, is a new format, right?
Yeah, tooth strips we talk about. So
tooth strips, Tide pen, whatever. I mean, a new format.
It's a new format. Yes.
New format,
yes.
right?
Yes.
So let's say the new format, the advertising is increasing sales for your brand as a whole. Let's say for your brand as a whole, the advertising is increasing sales, right? Correct. So that's excellent, right? I think what would help is that why is it happening, right? Is it because it's a new format? Is it because that you're talking about products and the benefits that you're creating by using products, which is why that halo is happening across the board, right? I think these decisions, why is the ad succeeding or failing, is a very important thing, because it, if you just have a yank or a keep decision, that's under leveraging things, right? Because you'll always be in that didactic mode, yank or keep, right? On the other hand, if you layer in a certain degree of insights, why is this ad working like this, right? Which actually requires talking to people, understanding what people are saying, right? Constructing word clouds, and there are new technology formats where you can do qualitative at scale, right? So I think those things become very, very important.
So,
So, which is where I think to me, it plays a very complementary role, and you can't have silos of insights and analytics. And I know people are talking about them, but they might come, you use different skill sets, right? But finally, together they have to deliver something which is useful for the business, because one without the other today is, and if anything that the CMI departments have to do is to ensure that the business is getting an integrated point of view, across all the tools that are there.
like you said, the what and the why together only is going to give the complete picture. Because
Correct,
until unless you give the complete picture, then what are you recreating? Like,
correct. I mean, and I just to quote Gandhiji, which is my favorite quote of Gandhiji's, that speed is irrelevant if you're traveling in the wrong direction.
yeah. So that's very nice. So what kind of methodologies? Because this other thing about let's be quick, let's fail fast. It's agile marketing, okay? And when you can just put the product and figure it out quickly, there's less cost. You can always test it out in e-com, like you were talking earlier also. So when all of that is possible, which are the particular scenarios you would say that uh, it must be coupled with qualitative insights, even if it means more time?
There's two mindset and skill sets which are extremely, extremely important, right? Correct. One is what I talked about earlier, the say-do gap, right? Behavior is the ultimate reality. Don't just depend on what people say. Observe people, right? See what people do. And any methodology that does not include either direct observation, which could be qualitative, or indirect observation, because you can do it through digital media now, what people are doing, is incomplete, right? You will have to kind of, I think somewhere it's very important to kind of, have the say-do gap, right? I'd say two things. Let me put three things. The second thing is this, that a lot of the innovation terms that you see here, right? Uh, Things like fail early, fail cheap, beta test a product, have come from the software industry, right? My only, and that is also breaking a few myths. The software industry is very, very different from the CPG industry. Correct. I mean, if you look at the fundamental difference between a Tesla and another car, is that the Tesla can easily kind of, change your car remotely, right? Change the settings of your car remotely. If you own a Toyota or a Maruti, you'll have to drive it to the dealer to do it, right? So fundamentally, you must also be very clear what is your category and the role of the category in your life, right? Not in your life, in people's lives, right? That's very, very critical. The way I approach an iPhone is going to be very different from the way I approach a soap, right? So that's, I think, a fundamental thing that and understanding that is people centricity. So that's one. Like the way you approach different relationships differently, right? I think it's the same thing. It's does understanding that does not make me less people centric. It makes me more people centric.
Are you saying that these kind of methodologies don't matter? It's just the mindset that matters. Hence, if you're getting behavior from data also, it's okay. Quant data also, it doesn't have to be qualitative, which might take more time.
I mean, if you do not have access to data at scale, which I think a lot of people might not have to, just go and observe people, see what people are doing, right? The problem is this, that whenever we feel that we need to ask people questions, right? Even before you ask the first question, see what people are doing, how they are behaving. That will give you a lot of stand in front of a shop See how people are opening their packages. See how people are using their things, right? That will give you a lot of insights, right? And then kind of, and then ask them, right? And then understand, I think it's a combination of behavior and intent, or what we call as intent data, what they say. I think that confluence is very important, correct? Right? There are other things that people are, I at least feel that people are questioning. So let's say this entire thing of qualitative groups, which was bread and butter, right? I think people are realizing that in many cases, qualitative groups have this thing of centralizing, right? So you tend to kind of, you tend to give very rational responses, and you'll have two people in the group to who kind of, influences findings of others. And therefore, one thing is to ensure that the moderator is very good and can take into account these things, right? But then there are other things as well. I mean, you have qualitative at scale, you have increasingly use of depth interviews, you have things where you kind of, you do a both qual quant exercise, right? So because where you get a response without others in the group kind of, corrupting that response, all that happens. But the two big things and the fundamental things beyond methodologies is this, that, cognize for the fact that there is a say-do gap in people, and therefore study behavior, understand what they are saying and find the gap. And just data and analytics is not enough, because that will give you the why. What you also need to layer it with the why. That's the big thing, I would say. Let's take a digital metric that is used pretty often, click-through rates, which is this, that once I see an ad, do I click on it, right? Correct. I can look at click-through rates. So that's excellent because it tells me that people are interested in this, right? That's the what, correct. But then I need to layer in the why and understand why people are doing it, right? Correct. Now, one way of doing it is this, that I could kind of, just ask them that why are you clicking on this, right? And I would get a rationalized response. Another way is that having different sets of images, right, as choices, right, and tell them that if you were to buy the product, which one would you click through, right? If you were to kind of, you look at various attributes, right, and then try to figure out, if I were to constrain the choice, and if I say that if this is why you were choosing, what will you choose, right? Yeah. So then you understand that at what different, so let's say when I'm trying to buy your product, I'm choosing one kind of uh, thumbnail. In, let's say, when I feel excited about the picture, when I feel the picture appealing, I'm choosing another kind of thumbnail. Right? That's a very practical way of using digital data and then converting it to the what. Right? Let's look at innovation. Correct. One of the big mistakes people make is this, that they go and ask people, oh, what do you want?
Oh,
Right.
that will never come. Yeah.
It will never come up because you will never know what you want, right? What are your, and a typical thing is this, that what are your unmet needs, right? You will never be, because you don't even have the time to think of unmet needs, right? You wouldn't even have the time of the day to think of unmet needs. You will have to figure out that this requires a certain degree of creativity, this requires a certain degree of working with people cross-functionally to understand what are the new ideas that are coming up, correct? Right. And that requires us, and so let me start off at the beginning. So where do those new ideas come from? Correct. You can trawl social listening. There's a lot of social listening data now, and it's very easily accessible, right? There's a lot of other data available. Let's say you find out that mental health is something which is kind of, riling people, right? You get that from behavior data. You're not going to people to get that, right?
Yes.
Then you understand what are the various dimensions of mental health, right? You again need not go to people. You can go to social listening, you can go to blogs, you can go to journals, you can go to experts, you can talk to psychiatrists. They will tell you, counselors, school counselors, college counselors, they'll tell you that this is therapists, this is what is happening, right?
A lot of secondary research, decoding,
secondary research, you do that. Right?
Competitive communication.
Right. So then you go down and sit with your R&D folks and your marketing folks and your agency folks and say that, look, this is the problem, that there's a big trend about mental health, right? And these are its ramifications. Now let's try to create a situation, and there are techniques, either you do design thinking, you have various innovation techniques. Let's try to formulate for the want of a better word, concepts, right, or propositions or value propositions. Okay. So these are the various value propositions that I have. Correct? Right. Okay. You are still not going and talking to consumers, remember. At the end, you are then saying, okay, now I have these value propositions. Now can I make the consumers quickly choose? Correct? Because once they start choosing, right? Because remember something that I think human beings are much more better at choosing than telling you what they need. The problem with research is this, that it gets boxed into a methodology.
Hmm.
What it needs is creativity to understand what your target group is, what the problem you're solving is, and then design the right framework and methodology for it. So, when I started my career, there was this work commissioned by BBC. BBC does a lot of educational program. If I remember correctly, this was on sexual habits, right? It was beyond love, right? Correct. And they wanted to do it in the most conservative areas of India possible because they wanted to construct radio programs on it, right? Correct. So what did we do? We recruited, people. We kind of, ensured that we selected the right moderators. They were gender aligned and all that. And we did a lot of elaborate things. We went to speak to them. We tried to make them comfortable, right? And we got tomes of research, right? We talked to them, correct? And we had to take care a lot of things which, would ensure that they have a free and frank conversation and they told us what they thought and what they did. Today, so many years later, if I were to do the same thing, would I do it the same? Maybe not. I would start off with, this entire social media. What are people talking about in social media? Right. I would go to talk to influencers. Right. Right. I would, because they are, it's not, the problem is the same. It's just this, that I'm trying to get insights. Right. Correct. But the way I'm doing it is changing, and that is cognizing for the new reality. So I know there's a huge digital space. I know that people like to talk about things in digital in some spaces. I know that they'd like to talk to some people about it, right? And these people are in the public sphere. I know that in the now, I mean, the use of therapists in India is much more than what used to be 15 years back, right? So somewhere I think I'm trying to solve the same problem. If BBC came to me today and commissioned this for me today, I would get to the same answers. I would say, Jasravi, that I would get to better answers, right? But I would use other means which are there today, which were not there yesterday. I think somewhere insights has to cognize for that change.
Yeah, yeah. And so market research agencies also, when they come up with a proposal, they have to have a holistic, view and proposal. So netnography is something that you would be doing at in-house.
Yes, so I think understanding people's, especially, and I know a lot of people are doing social listening, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people do ratings and reviews, right? They are very useful, correct? And obviously, the more social media is prevalent in a country, or the more saliency of e-com in the total business or digital commerce in the total business, it will increase, right? China, it's absolutely critical. In some markets, it is important, but less so. Right? China has what, 30% online FMCG. It would be much more critical in China, right? So than in, let's say, in a country which has 4% online business. One thing that I wanted to speak on today, Ravi, which I think is absolutely critical, is this: that one of the problems of insights is that many cases are getting siloed, right? There are agencies who have become specialists in one thing, right? Which is good because there's a learning curve impact. There is an agency which is specialized in understanding advertising, whether pre-testing or tracking. There is an agency which is specialized in understanding new product development, right? The problem is this, that's great, right? It's important to have domain expertise, right? What is a problem is that people are getting specialized within a particular technique of that kind of domain. So let's say I know how to understand, and I don't want to name agencies obviously, but I know new product development, but there's only one model. If I was an expert in how people how new products succeed or fail, what makes them succeed or fail, what should I do? Fabulous. But the moment I start thinking that, oh, there's only one methodology I know, and ditto for advertising, right? That's where the problem happens. That's where the lack of trust happens. And I've seen there are insights people which with whom clients actually listen to. They fly them in to listen to them. Right, correct. I can tell you them also. And if there's one criteria they have this ability to join dots. Correct. And that's very critical. So more than what I'm trying to do is to give you hacks, which is not just say A methodology is better than B methodology. Yes, there are various advantages and disadvantages, and my role here is not to plug one methodology over the other, right? Correct. So the point is this, that it's very important, and that's a skill that is rarely thought of. Insights is not a technical function. It's not about constructing a sampling frame, and it's that. But it's more important than that. It's how people react to stimuli, right?
So the connecting the dots, when you say connecting the dots, please explain, because this has also become a cliche term. What do you really mean? And you have to take an example now, like an actual example, because otherwise it stays theoretical.
Let's say take an example like Google, right? Correct. So let's say I get an insight, which is this, that I sit with people in conversations these days, and there is this desire to kind of, to quickly provide information, right? And impress others with that information, right? Which is this, that, you're having an information backup, I sit together in groups, I sit together among friends, I go and kind of, do ethnography, I immerse in somebody's life, and I see this person having conversations saying that, you know what, 70% of the world's people are immunized. I'm telling you this, right? He or she is doing it to impress others, but at the same time, there's a risk that tomorrow somebody will find out that information. So that's the context. That's the role that potentially Google can play in his life. Gives him that ability to impress others, right? You will not, the only way you'll get that is by sitting with people, deeply understanding the motivations of people. Why is that person doing it? What you will also understand, and therefore then you come to how that person accesses information. Correct? Right? You will then need to know how that person accesses. So he wants that information, right? How does that person access information, and what is he looking for? Correct? So he's done. Now you're trying to say that he's looking for people who are, he needs fast answers. Correct? Right? So you then see how he's behaving on the web, right? And you see that, so he's what he's trying to do is that he's trying to look at fast answers, right? From Google. So he's kind of quickly hiding his cell phone and saying that, oh, let me just check it out so that I don't get called out at the end, right? Correct. Right? Clear? So one is his overall human motivation. The next is that how he's interacting with the platform, which is how his product usage is, right? Correct, right? And that he needs quick and access to information, right? That's his product usage. So you need to understand that and tie it into his desire to impress others. Desire to impress others is very broad, right? You understand how is he wanting to impress others. How can then you try to understand, trawl the web and see how is he actually accessing your product, right? Using your product to give that information, right? Correct. So that's the next part of it, right? And then the next part is this, that then you try to figure out either by asking or by his behavior, because he'll also need to be confident about your sources, right? Then you might go and ask him, then that could be a survey question, that according to you, what sources among these things are trustworthy? Correct. So now do you realize that I can construct an entire product by joining the dots, right? I have sat with people in ethnography in their surroundings and understood that they need to impress others and how they impress others, right? I've seen their web behavior and see how they access that information in the context of my product, which is a web browser, right? And then using survey research, I found out that the things that they consider trustworthy are this. So when I'm giving that information, so my product needs to give them quick information with a footnote saying that it has come from this source. Correct? So that's where how you try to start joining dots. is this? Rapid fire. Okay.
That's right. We took it literally. So I'll ask you some questions. Please be rapid and please be clear.
Yeah.
Yes. Mother's best advice.
Mother's best advice. It's not very rapid, right?
I'll be kind.
Learn music, which I have not been able to follow.
That's strange because all Bengalis that I know are really learn it. Okay.
I am very bad at music.
Okay.
I love music. I can't play it or sing it.
Yeah. Alternate profession could have been
travel blogger. So I would have, again, 10 years back, I would have said travel journalist. Today I'm saying travel blogger.
Yes. As per your spouse, your most often used phrase.
Right. You would have heard that as well.
Yeah. A book you'd like to gift to all your friends.
There was a book called Pepsi to Apple by John Scully. Right. It talked about a marketer's journey from a company like Pepsi to a company called Apple and the transition that happened. I thought it was fascinating long time back. I read it many years ago. But that's a fascinating book, and I'm a avid reader. So there are many other books. But
if you were to devote the rest of your life to philanthropy, what cause would you choose?
The female child, especially, children, especially in places like India who are trafficked, that would be, and that's something that I'm already involved in. So, something, how does one rescue, not just rescue, kind of, give them back lives, which are, and maybe because I have a daughter, that's why the thing comes in, right?
Yeah. How would you like strangers to remember you?
As finally kind of, somebody who uses intellect to get things done.
What is a lesson that took you a long time to learn?
That there are various ways. I mean, winning an argument is not the only way of getting things done.
Yeah. What is one missed opportunity that you wish you could have a second chance at?
So at one point of time, I was planning on opening an analytics company. And at that time, the analytics revolution was happening, right? So if I had not chickened out and followed on my dream, who knows?
Now, I would request you to share any online addresses, emails that you'd like to mention here so that guests, if they want to reach out to you, they can.
So my LinkedIn is there.
Yeah.
So I think that's the best place to reach me on. Right?
Sure.
Oh, it was a great and very intense conversation, right? I think I've never had this kind of a conversation for a long time, right? And that's what I think it was. So let me put it this way. Jagged with Jasravi was really jagged. So.
Yeah.